Hey, how's it going? Oh, you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can now.
Okay, welcome. It's so nice to see you today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's session. We're here with Ian Peterman, who I'm so excited to talk with because you have so many credentials and so much experience in the space of what we're talking about today. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And
Yeah,
before we get started, well, how are you? You now are
I'm
in
good.
you're you have moved all over the country. You're now in Arizona, right?
Yes, now in Arizona, and yeah, sorry I was a little bit late. My audio was not working, so
Oh, no worries. Well, I know
it,
you have a full schedule and you do
yes.
many things. You do many things. Well, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Britta Cabanos. I'm the founder of Inside Fashion Design. And if you're not familiar with us or it's your first time here, please check us out online. Inside Fashion Design is a space that I created. I launched in 2017 after working in the industry for many years, apparel specifically, to provide a space where we can come together and learn from each other and find inspiration and resources and connect as a community and learn and grow from each other to make a better impact in our work. And I was so inspired by your book. We had met before I read your book. Um, I meant to look.
Yeah,
What year did the book come out? Can you remind me? You remember?
21. I think it came out in 21, but we met in like 2018 or something. It was a while, yeah.
Yeah,
Been a
yeah, and it's
while.
so well, and what I find so interesting and I guess fascinating is that you're not specifically in apparel. You know, you do other types of product design, but there's so many, you know, everything crosses over if you're in the design world and so many consistencies with how we work and how we aim to work. And so when I read your book, I had this whole other view of design principles and conscious design. And so that really inspired me in a lot of the work that I'm doing now. So we'll get into that in today's session. And if you're new here, please, well, if you're new or not, we'd love to have you join the conversation. So there is a comment section you'll see on the live stream here. And please tell us where you're from, ask any questions along the way. We'd love to know if you're in apparel design specifically or what design role you're in, if you are in one. And another thing I'd love to learn is what brought you here today and what you would like to leave with. And we know your time is valuable and there's so many, so many options for live streaming and Zooms and things that you can be attending. So we appreciate your time here today. And so please, share with us as we go, ask questions anytime you wish. And I'm just going to dive in and start with the lesson here. We have some slides that we're going to go through. And let me see if I can add those to the stage here. So as I mentioned, I'm the founder of Inside Fashion Design, and recently we launched the Conscious Fashion Design Academy, which is an online learning platform through our website. And we have gathered industry pros from around the globe to teach sessions on different aspects of design and development. So please check that out when you have a moment. There's a lot of opportunity in there. We have an ever evolving additions and things that we're adding. So check back often and you can see all the things that are opportunities for you there. And today's session is implementing conscious fashion design principles into your work. And again, whether you're apparel design or any other kind of design, these pillars and principles can work for any creative product that you are working on. And so welcome again. And again, we'd love to hear where you're coming in from. And something to think about is, where are you now in your journey or maybe in your career? Are you starting your own brand or do you work for a company? Are you an aspiring designer? I think it's just interesting to think where you are right now. And then after this session, we want to make sure you leave with some valuable tips and tools and things that you can actually implement. So comparing where you are now and to where you want to go and how we can provide some things for you to take away and implement in your work. So some of the key discussion points and takeaways for today is gaining ideas on how to incorporate conscious design principles into your fashion design process. My background is apparel, so it's pretty focused on the fashion side of things, and understanding the importance of creating lasting and positive impact through your brand. I think this is something us and maybe the older generation didn't think about years ago, is the impact down the road of items we were selling. It was all about sales and volume and, the next delivery and the next season, and not really thinking through the longer term impact. So obviously that's way more important today and something we all need to do. And also gaining insights into how to build some of these strategies that can align with the sustainability and your values. And this might be my favorite one, is thinking about the legacy, because that's another thing that I didn't necessarily think about in the past. Like, I guess it has to do with the long-term effects and the impact, but what kind of legacy do you want to leave with your work and your brand? And I don't think it has to be a huge, you don't have to become famous or a huge influencer or anything like that, but all the little things that you do that can affect the future generations, I think is so important to think about, and you've really talked about that in your book. And that leads me to you, and I'm so happy again to have you here today. So Ian, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about your background and your experience, because you've done so many incredible things. You're a podcaster, you're an author, you're a founder, you're a designer. So I'll pass it to you to give a little more detail about your background.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have done a lot a lot of things. My design, I am a little bit unique. I'm a third generation designer. My grandfather, my father, all designed, and so I grew up with that design mentality. And I've worked in I've worked in so many industries, but I actually started in telecommunications, lasers of all things. That
Oh,
was my that was my
I did not
starting
know
point.
that.
I was 16. I got an internship. They liked me. I kept working through college. And so that's very hard tech. No one was thinking about any of these things in that space. It was all about now we got to get the next, how can we get more power out of a laser? And that was basically all a cheaper and more power.
Mhm.
And so that kind of experience in design carried through. I worked at HP, I worked at Nike, I worked at Adidas. It's all as Britta said, the numbers were the numbers, and that's what you aimed for, even in creative space. And that I did all that work to get the experience, because that's how you get experience, is you have to work somewhere.
Right.
But I grew up in Portland. Sustainability, recycling, all these things were super core to how I lived at home, which was a lot different than my day job. And so that's where, in founding my design firm, I really wanted to. I didn't have to go get the experience. I had enough work experience. I could be a little bit more picky and work on projects that were more sustainable and actually matched what I really wanted to do. And so that, as you said, I've started a couple companies before, been a founder. I've worked in sustainable materials on the material science side. I host a podcast where I've interviewed quite a few fashion companies, but really all kinds of companies that work in sustainability, just because I feel like there's so many solutions out there that people are thinking of and coming up with, and we need those shared more, because
Mhm.
as a designer, those resources are kind of tucked away.
Mhm.
And so we actually focus probably 60 to 70% of the guests on the podcast so far, we were their first podcast.
Oh,
So
great.
trying to find all those little hidden ones where they're doing something really cool, they're early stage, and just sharing like, hey, these people they have figured out a solution. Like let's take a look at what they're doing and trying to promote that, because as you're trying to design products, whatever product you're designing, the more examples in the real world you can see of someone being successful, the easier it is for you to come up with your own design, especially if you work at any company where there's a large hierarchy and you got to
Mhm.
defend your design. If you can go and say, hey, these people over here are profitable. Like, I'm not, this isn't this bad idea that looks good on paper. It's good across the board. This like look at them,
It's
like
actually
they're
working.
being it's working. It's being
Yeah.
successful. Like let's shift over that way. And so as more and more companies get highlighted, the
Yeah.
better we can point out, hey, they're being successful over there. Like we can do it too. And that is how you accelerate change, which sustainability and things like that need to happen now. So the
Yeah, I
faster we
love
can.
that. I love that because 'cause you're focusing on it's those voices that aren't necessarily heard, and, some of these small startups or small independent brands, they don't have the marketing dollars and the budget, so they really rely on word of mouth, and we try to we love finding those stories too, where we can really show there's so many little brands that I mean, the positive and fortunate thing with the smaller brands is they can pivot pretty quickly, and they can maybe do things
Mhm.
that a larger corporation, it would be a much slower process to implement. But when you're a smaller brand, you can implement those things fairly quickly. And so, yeah, learning and seeing how other people are doing it is such a great way to get inspired and understand what options there are and what possibilities there are out there. So you're doing great work in sharing those stories.
Yeah, and it's for me it's always exciting and fun to be able. I get to learn all kinds of new things, which is great. And then it's always really exciting to talk to those brands because and we're not like the hugest podcast on in the world, but when we reach out, a lot of times there's this, oh, somebody noticed us. And I feel like there's like this way of me kind of trying to reward people too, of like, your stuff is cool. Somebody outside of the 5 people in your company who all know it's cool. Like I,
Yeah.
as an outside person, also think it's great. Like let's
Yeah.
you. And
Let's
so
share it.
that kind of boost, like it's helpful. It's good. It's good to have somebody from the outside just reach out and
Yeah.
go, "What you're doing is awesome. Keep
Yeah.
doing it."
It
Uh,
lifts everybody up.
it does, and it's because it can be when you're working. It can be hard when you're a small startup and you're just in your bubble working really hard,
Yeah.
and not everyone is for you, and it's hard in general. Even if even if things are going well, it's still hard.
Yeah.
So,
Solopreneurship is not for the
oh,
faint of heart, or even if it's, 5 people with your business, it's most likely those 5 people are doing multiple jobs, multiple roles
oh
to
yes,
be able to
absolutely,
achieve everything. So, yeah. Oh, it's
yeah.
well, thank you. Yeah, it's, wonderful to hear, and again, I think it's you don't have to be the biggest known thing in the world, but you're affecting your community, and like you said, word of mouth, and even I always refer to the saying of like it's 1% in the right direction has that ripple effect, and even if it's only a tiny sliver of going in that direction or just getting noticed or getting that one person to shout out for you, it accumulates over time, and yeah, just keep going, and it's yeah, take some drive and determination to do those things for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the word of mouth thing is we always forget this, but the whole like 6 degrees of separation,
Mhm.
like it really it is a numbers game, but if you get in front of the right person, there is only a 6-person chain between you and everybody else. So
Yeah,
it's possible, and that's where you got to keep going. But you have these little bumps like that. They're like, yeah, I should keep going, and that's you have no idea where that connection is going to come from. That
yeah, and it could be
changes
just
everything.
could be that one person that makes all the difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Rachel. Welcome, Rachel. Nice to see you. You're in LA now. Rachel is originally from Portland and in the design community. So happy to see you here, Rachel. So, okay. So we're talking today about conscious design in fashion. And Ian, I'll let you just dive right in. And I threw in a couple of slides here, just things that I wanted to comment as we go. So again, anyone watching, please reach out with any questions along the way. We can stop and have a discussion. And it's really meant to be interactive and your opportunity to chat with Ian. So please um, type in a comment anytime you have one or a question. So Ian, take it away.
Yeah. So what is fashion conscious design, right? And what it applies to fashion design. It applies to all design, but really, and this is there's 4 pillars to this that really kind of separate out what it is. Um, and I have um,
Tell me if
the
you want me
first.
to jump ahead or
Oh,
next
good.
time. Like,
Well, this is
I'm
perfect
pulling
actually
the
right
slides
here.
here. Okay.
So the first pillar that's really important, observation, and it's something that we're taught as designers, right, to go look at things and do research. And I have never in any of my corporate roles ever had time to do it. I've never actually been able to sit down and do the research and really look at what's out there
Mhm,
as anywhere near as much as I wanted to, and in most cases, not really given the ability to. But it is something that we need to do, and it's things that, like with the podcast where I'm interviewing people and talking about it. There's research, or there's ways to look at what's happening outside besides just heavy research. There's podcasts and there's books and there's all these things, and really making sure that you're looking at what's happening around. And when you do so, like, look, there's the surface level of, okay, well, yeah, there's somebody launched a sustainable product over there, or they have a successful fashion brand over here. What are they doing? But it's diving in a little bit more and looking at how are they doing it, what's making them unique. This kind of observation level is really, really important, because you can find things that are working, you can find gaps, you can find ways to improve on what's out there, you can find partnerships, and that's something I've found really, really important when you're doing stuff, especially if you're working on your own. Building those partnerships is really important. Next pillar is impact. So once you have an idea of what's happening out there, that's great. It's You got to look at what is your impact and start to make decisions of what do you want your impact to be. And so impact, when I talk about impact this way, it's, yes, sustainability, so you have environmental impact, but it's also, what is the impact of your brand and your product on the people who make the product, the people who
mhm,
buy the product, the people around the people who buy the product, right? If you're building a physical product, it's going to live in the environment. There's other people, you have your main user that we all really love to focus on. As
mhm.
what gets drilled into you in school is, well, the person that's wearing the clothes, like, that's what you got to think about, is that person.
The
That's
end
that's
user.
the user.
Mhm,
And we call it end user, right? And then we have this kind of this finality of, like, oh, that's the only user you got to think about. But if you really look at it, it's, well, how is this impacting the people around them? How is this, after they're done using the product, who's going to deal with that product? How is that, what is impact is that looking like?
mhm,
Things like fast fashion might not have happened as much if we thought about thought about those more.
mhm,
But it's thinking about the actual impact the product has on, from start to finish, as a raw material, all the way through end of life. And this concept's circle, or cradle to cradle, cradle to grave. The concept has been there, um, but it takes a lot of effort to really think through those things. And so it's also one of those things that kind of gets thrown on the side and ignored. But by doing so, there's a lot of instances where you can find better resources. You can look at the impact and go, well, hey, there's actually a way to upcycle this product. There's a way to recapture the raw material from this. Those kinds of things is what you'll find when you really start to look at the impact of it. Um, and then connection. Connection is really important. It's networking. It's making sure that you're connecting with people and making sure that they're involved. So, you can sit there and do the first 2 pillars by yourself pretty well and think you're really great. But if you don't add in the part where you talk to somebody else outside your bubble, you'll never know what you're missing. And so it's extending that, and do the first 2 by yourself, and then go back and go, okay, well, now I'm going to talk to the users. I'm going to connect with people that sell the product, make the product, extract the raw materials, process the recycling or garbage at the end, and figure out all those things and get their input involved. And this is something that on a corporate level can often be very hard to do because there's an ingrained hierarchy in terms of who can say what in front of who about about the product. Um, I have been fired because I got my boss in trouble by saying the wrong thing to his boss. So I know very well how the corporate ladder can sometimes really just kill that part of the
Yeah.
conversation.
And you're all excited because you're thinking you're sharing something really positive, and then it's not, you
Yeah,
didn't say it
or being
exactly the right
honest,
message.
just being honest about, hey, this isn't what we think it is, and if it doesn't align with the mission, there can be that risk.
Yeah.
Um, but it's worth it most of the time.
Yeah.
Not that
And
I
I
recommend
love
being fired,
that
so don't do that.
you look at the connection from not just a consumer connection, but like you
Mhm.
mentioned, the farmer, the fiber, the weaver, the sewer, all of those people that are touching it, you're all connected. It's like a family tree. It's like you're going back into your lineage of, where did it even come from? And how can you build that as a connection? Because it just brings the whole process, together better, and a deeper understanding of who all is involved and who's affected by the process and the making of that product. So it's so much more beyond just the end user and the connection with your consumer.
And it's something that this really plays into. There's some brands. I think one of them's Alafia. They do soaps that if you do this process, you actually figure out who's involved. You're able to tell a much better story. So if you're looking at this from like a branding marketing standpoint, you actually want to do all of this because you can tell a much more compelling story about your product if you actually know and have connected to everybody actually involved. That's why I think it's Alafia is a company that they're like soaps made in Africa, but it's women, it's fair trade, it's fair wages. They do all these things, but they tell part of their whole brand, the story
Mhm.
is we know who in what village made this bar. Like we can tell you the story of your product when you buy it. We actually know the story instead of many products are just like, well, it came out of factory, here you go, buy it or
Yeah.
not. Like
And
they are.
yeah, I want to personally buy that because then I feel that connection to the person that made it. It's like, oh man, this sweet person in this random village remote, put their heart and soul into this, and natural ingredients, I'm sure, and things they grew. And so as a consumer, it makes you want to buy it. That's where you want to put your money.
Right, because people purchases are emotional, and we like to support people. And so if you know the people, then that brand story that becomes a much better connection and more interesting for people, because they know where it's going. It's really that it's growing that you're attached to it, you're invested in it. You go, oh well, I'm buying this because I know this is going to people in a certain place. It's going to an actual person. There's that connection level that if you don't know all those things, you can't even tell people, and you kind of miss out on an opportunity there. You gonna say something?
Uh no, I was just checking the slide to see if you wanted to jump ahead, but we still have to talk about legacy.
Yes. Well, there's two more really quick.
Yeah.
That last one is inclusion, which kind of tucks into connection, but it's really making sure that people are included on all those levels in your discussions, in your how you work,
Mhm.
um, and thinking through, and then legacy, which I know is your favorite.
Well, they're
So
they're all important.
they are, but I mean, I also really like the point of legacy, and it's really looking at things. You look at the impact, right? And you think about those things, but legacy goes beyond just the immediate. It's not just about what the product does while the product is a product, or while that material is somehow in or under your control in some way. It's how does your brand, how does your products impact generations down? How
Mhm.
does it, what are people going to remember it for when you're dead and gone, when the brand is, still hopefully still existing,
Mhm.
or not, whether it is or not, what are people going to remember it for? Is your Wikipedia page going to be, they messed up the environment, everybody bought it, but now it's all trash we have to deal with now, or is it going to be
Mhm.
something else? And it's one of those things that everybody everybody is building their legacy. Everybody and every company and every brand is building it. What you get to do is choose whether you are actively deciding what that is,
Mhm.
or if everybody else is just going to write your legacy for you.
Oh, I love
And
that.
it's really, I think it's something that we kind of haven't thought about. we just like let it happen because we think, oh, legacy is for something, it's like for kings or whatever, like that have lots of money. Only rich people don't try to do that.
Mhm.
um and really it's all of us, and especially as designers we can help guide brands towards something. And so
Mhm.
thinking about what is the really long-term impact, and if you're a founder, deciding what is your goal, what do
Mhm.
you want that to be, because that can be a really amazing north star for your brand and for guiding everyone in your company that you ever hire, ever work with, towards that same goal. And when you do that, you can have some really great results.
I love that. Yeah, it's again, it's one of those things I didn't really think about previously. Maybe it's my age now. I'm thinking more about things I will leave behind. And even as a solopreneur, or if you're in a large company, like you said, you can still kind of control the legacy that you're leaving behind. And even if it's just, a method that you came up with or how you inspired or influenced people, that will still, carry on and trickle down and hopefully, continue to inspire future generations of how things are made. So it doesn't have to be a huge, famous thing. It can be a small
Right.
gesture that you've just decided this is how you want to work. And by how you are modeling what you're doing to others, it's going to, inspire and affect them, you know, even in
Yeah.
small ways. So
Well,
yeah.
and I have kids, so that probably affected my my thinking
Yeah,
of this thing. And it's
yeah,
also one of those,
sure.
I love that you mentioned that, because it's not always about these big things. And I think that's where people get hung up too, is they go, oh, legacy, like that's like you have monuments in of you somewhere, and like you're like the person that did the thing that everyone on the planet will remember for thousands of years. Like that's not all the things. And
Mhm.
a lot of times there's little things that we just like, when you've lived long enough, you eventually will look back at your life and you'll realize that there's these little tiny things that happened that had massive change later down in your life. And that's inside of one lifetime, right? And
Yep.
so if you think about that and you extrapolate that, well, who knows how many little things that you have done that have impacted somebody else's life and made big changes. There's so many of those instances. And so when you're really, if you really sit down and craft that intentionally, consciously creating that, you can have the result that you want. Like you're doing it all the time. You're creating you're creating waves constantly.
Whether you know it or not.
Right, whether you know it or not. And it's, and I'm not saying you should, every time you like pick up an apple and have a bite, you should think about what the impacts of that are. But thinking about, as you're building a brand, especially and you're designing things, what can that be and what do you want it to be, and
Mhm.
aiming towards that.
Yeah, and you can have that control over it. You can make those choices, so you are in a little more control than just letting it happen on its own.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Should we move on to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so this was, where I was gonna just jump in, and from an apparel design standpoint, of course, we talk a lot about circularity and how important it is that the process is circular and it's not linear. A product just doesn't fall off on the end and then go into the landfill. So, as an apparel designer, building a circularity process. So, this was an infographic to show how I work and how I'm striving to work all the time. And I've broken down steps within each of these phases of what I, as a designer or developer, would be doing. So just an example of, looking at the circulatory process from the very beginning before you even start product. And then of course you move into your concepts and your design and development and your kickoff and go to market and production and all those things. But just thinking about it with an end in mind before you even start. Because if you get started and you start designing and then you're using materials, you may not have many options for disposing of that polyester or spandex or whatever it may be. So I think just important to really remind, it's a good reminder for me every time I'm starting something that I start with, okay, well, how is it going to, what's the end of life for this product, or how am I going to make the best decisions for that product, thinking in this manner. So that was, just kind of some inspiration and a reminder for myself and others to really think in a circular manner.
Yeah, I love that it doesn't just magically disappears at the end, right? I think that's something to keep in mind of the circular thinking through things circularly is really, it will help guide guide you to think through things.
Yeah. So this slide, do you want to talk more about this slide? This was.
Yeah, so there's some research. So I own a design firm, and I work with companies, and I have to argue in front of them in debate of why present a real argument as to why should you spend money on sustainability. What is actually
Mhm.
there? How can we make it worthwhile? It's the, where do I point out in the world and go, hey, it's working. Here it's true. And so one of the things I found this study, it's a couple years old now, but I thought it was really important because it was a pretty big study done on pricing. And one of the things that I still have companies come to me and other people that go, oh, nobody wants to pay for
Mm,
sustainability. Um, and yet we have studies showing that 85% of consumers will actually they will spend more, not necessarily a ton more, right? It could be a little bit more, or it could be just picking something that is more sustainable over something that is not. And, you know, I would add to this in the conversations I've had in a couple of years from like a PR and marketing side, those agencies I've talked to, what they have noticed is that sustainability used to be something that we could put on as a feature, and we could go, this is a sustainable cup, and like it would sell. It would do well. People are like, oh yeah, great, it's sustainable. Now more and more people are expecting it to be
mm,
there. It's not really that sales feature that it used to be. Now it's a, well, if you're not, you get a minus. If you
yeah,
are, you're at neutral. Like it's becoming more and more that way. And so now the PR and marketing companies I work with, they're not putting sustainability as like a line item. It's not one of the feature points. Because of this change, people are willing to pay a little bit more, and it's just not the sales point that that it used to be. You just got to do it.
yeah. It's, in a way, that's a really good thing because it's just expected.
Yeah,
Because
it,
consumer is
I
expecting it, and yeah,
yeah, it's being expected. You have to have thought about it, and it feels a little bit like a tipping point of now it's, if it's expected, I've got to actually do it, and that'll eventually get everyone everyone down the road. Um, so this is kind of just extending that. The other thing that comes out a lot in products is it you look at whole sustainability. So like you're looking at circularity. When you design to be sustainable, when you design for a better positive impact, you end up having a better product. And almost every single time, I actually can't think of any good examples of it not being true, you become more efficient. And better efficiency is almost always more profitable in the end. It may
mhm,
take some investment up front, right? There may be some hurdles to get over at the beginning, but eventually, if you're more efficient, and that's what manufacturing floors spend almost all of their R&D money on, is trying to become more
yeah,
efficient. They want efficiency. If they could hit 100% efficiency, they would they would be crazy happy about that.
Mhm.
Even 95% is really great. And that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But if you're doing that, you actually are becoming more sustainable. And so thinking through those things of efficiency almost always in some way, if you're looking at it from a actual material efficiency standpoint, material efficiency is sustainable. That's using more of the material, less waste is a
Mhm.
huge jump. Should you always use better materials if you can? Yes, there's definitely some materials you probably don't want to use all the time. Um, but that efficiency part is one of the ways that I get companies to understand and swing over to
Yeah.
to it.
And then you're thinking going back to that impact. You're thinking a longer term impact. So, like you said, it might be more expensive up front to invest in maybe a higher price material because it's organic or, eco-friendly, but the long-term results will be a greater impact, more positive impact, maybe like the profitability, and that investment will pay off. It might be a little bit slower, and then we can talk about slow fashion, but getting those things implemented up front is only gonna have positive results.
Yeah, and it's things looking at things in different ways. Like if you think about fast fashion, right? That one of the biggest wastes, and there's lots of big wastes in it, but one of the biggest is that you end up with having a bunch of clothes that never got sold.
Mm,
And then you have to throw it away because according to
there's
fast
no
fashion, it's
space for
dead.
it. Yeah.
There's no space. The store, Macy's is not going to pick up your collection from last quarter. It's done. Spring's
Yeah.
over and we're done. Next
Moving
collection
on.
in. So
Mhm.
that it's getting thrown away. And there's, as stores start to there's some stores that have started to charge. They'll go, oh well, you have to buy it all back. Like you have to.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
we don't want it. You as a manufacturer are not going to pay. You as the brand, you have to buy back all this stuff that can't sell, and then
Mhm.
you have to pay to dispose of it. And even if you do the cheapest option of throwing it in the landfill, you are still going to pay to throw it away. So now you have these costs. And so if you can have a better material that biodegrades, that you don't have to do that, or it's designed to be unassembled and remade into something else, like those are ways where you can possibly recuperate money as a brand that you have a loss from.
Yeah.
And so that's, those that falls into that. It's sustainable and it's also more efficient because that kind of waste is just
Yes.
bad efficiency.
Huge waste in so many ways. Yeah, for sure. So
Oh, this one, it'll be brief. You don't have to read all of it, but basically it was a study done on investments and whether companies were worth more or less. And so what they found is that companies that were weighted towards high sustainability, that were $1.93, they were worth 22.60 a share in 2010, whereas the same group, if they were not sustainable brands, they only were worth 15.40. So
mhm.
that is a 50% increase over for sustainable brands versus not sustainable brands.
Yeah.
Granted, that's like, what is that, 17 years, but that 50% growth over 17 years, that's enough for you to be a hedge fund manager or not. That is a really really good markup
That's a
on it.
huge positive number. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's, there's as much as people want to say there's not money in it, there's money in it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, so much waste. Yes. We could go on and on just about the fashion side of fast fashion.
So I threw this in here because when I was preparing for our call today, and as I've mentioned, I'm a designer. So from a product standpoint and designs, I think of, and if you Google design principles, you will come up with so many lists. There's the 10 principles of design, the 6 principles of design, the 7. I mean, there's so many versions of it. But overall, when you're thinking about designing a product, you're looking at really the aesthetic. Here's proportion, balance, emphasis, like function, scale, harmony, all of those things that are going into the aesthetic. So here would be a traditional 10 principles of design. And this can apply, all the images are fashion, obviously, but this could apply to any product design. And then when you break it down even further, specific to apparel design, you're talking about line, shape, color, texture. So I just wanted to do this quick Google search and kind of see what was out there for principles. And you call them pillar. I kind of interchange pillars and principles
It
back and
all works.
forth. And then, I also did Googled pillars of conscious design, and I found this one from medium.com, an article that was written, which was really interesting. But there again, this one included a little more than just the aesthetic. It was function was the number one thing, usability, reliability, and then aesthetic. And again, this would apply to not just specific to apparel, but I thought this was interesting to look at what somebody was calling out as the pillars of design. And then we get into yours, and they're, in my mind, like untraditional, and it's just a different point of view. It's a much more philosophical and bigger way of thinking that can apply to all design. So I just kind of wanted to show a comparison of, looking at design principles was really just the aesthetic of it. But yours is
Yeah.
like the whole picture and how it affects everything. And so I just wanted to point that out because I think that's when I read your book, that was what really impacted me the most was, okay, as a trained designer, I'm used to looking at, okay, shape, color, texture, balance, proportion, all those things. I wasn't thinking about, the long-term impact and the legacy and the connection. Like, we would of course be aiming for our consumer and we know our target consumer, but were we really connected with them beyond just the person that was going to buy it? Not really. So I really, I guess, appreciate your way of thinking and the philosophy and just kind of pointing out the differences between what you're talking about and what we as trained designers were trained to look at.
But I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I'm part of. I run actually the LA chapter for IDSA, which is the Industrial Designers Association, and we have the same thing. And when I went to college, it was fashion design as well, and so I did soft goods and spent time with fashion designers and working in that space. And across the board, fashion design, industrial design, you know, we're considered designers and more separated from the technical and everything afterwards. And industrial designers, especially, we are. If you look at the general career of an industrial designer, we get brought in to make it look pretty, and then we're sent away. That's it.
Mhm.
Then the engineers take over and they make it happen,
They
which
figured
usually
out
means
how to do. Yep.
it looks worse, but it has the mechanically and electrically works.
Mhm.
And then maybe if the company has a budget, they'll bring in the designer back and go, can make it a little bit nice again. The engineers ruined the aesthetics, but you can't make it as good as it was before because here's more constraints.
This is how we
And
can make it and how it actually works.
yeah, exactly. But what's interesting is that when you go to school, you learn about all the fabrication. You have to learn. Like I spent time in shop. I built products in design school.
Mhm.
All the fashion designers I knew, they were sewing their own clothes to show out. Oh, I designed it. Now I'm making it.
Yep.
So we come as designers. We come prepped in college level of yeah, you got to learn how to make all this stuff. But then actual practice, most of the time we get stuck with, well, make it look good, and then see ya. Well,
Worry about worry about the other parts later.
exactly. And so this is something that IDSA is struggling with in defining industrial design because it's not used. Basically, industry doesn't use industrial design as it should, and
Mhm.
so there's this conversation going, well, what is design? And the main thing that comes up is, well, nobody wants to just be the aesthetic group.
Mhm.
We know all these other things. How do we get that integrated? And so I don't have a good solution for it. It's definitely not working, but it's something that's been coming up a lot in the last couple of years
Yeah.
of how do you actually get this in and think about these things beyond just aesthetics? Because like you said, it's all the design principles. It's all how does it look? How does it feel
Yeah.
to the user? So, oh, and it's only to the end user. It's not about how easy it is to for the manufacturing person assembling it. It's not about how easy it is to package it. It's not about any of those things. And my opinion is that as designers, it takes a little bit more work, but we are in the unique position of being able to guide that more if we have the right tools and language to talk to all the project managers and the engineers. And for fashion, it's all the people who build all the tech packs and the pattern makers, right? You
Yeah.
got to be able to communicate those things really well in a way that isn't designy, because if you talk in designy language, they go, well, that's pretty, that's cute,
Yeah.
thank you, I'm gonna go make it work.
Yeah.
But
And then
if
they
you talk,
might have to rework the whole thing and
yeah, and it goes
redesign
back
it
to
basically.
efficiency. It's really inefficient to make a really pretty sketch, go pattern make it, engineer it, see it, and go, no, that's not what I really meant. Let's try doing a sketch again, and you just keep doing this. Like, yes, there's iteration, but
Mhm.
there's also iteration because information is lost, and that kind of iteration is not great. And
And
so that,
yeah, I was gonna mention as a designer today, I think we are being held much more responsible and accountable for thinking through those things than we were in the past. And yeah, it's one that you
oh
go to
yes,
school, you get trained, you make all these pretty pictures. And as an apparel designer, you might be thinking about the pattern and how you're going to construct it. And most likely you are, but are you thinking about mass production or how, efficiencies in the factory or again, the end user, does it really function? Is that arm design sleeve really gonna really gonna feel good or so it's hopeful to me that designers now are being more responsible and thinking through these things a little bit more. But yeah, like you mentioned, back in school, it's like they didn't necessarily teach that. So you would make your pretty pictures and pass it on, and then start the chain reaction of everyone having to redo and how many prototypes you may have wasted, how many iterations
and
you've
time,
gone through, and time. Yeah, time and money. Yeah,
yeah.
people's time at the job, having to redo and redo and yeah, trying to meet deadlines, and then it's all stressful for everybody, so
Yeah, it's funny. I know some architects, and I feel like are a little bit ahead. They're getting more. They started when I went to school. Architects were already known as like, oh, they'll design anything you can't make, and then the engineers have to take over, and that was kind of where it was. But they really like architects I know that are working now. They've been now for years. They're like, oh, I actually have to think about this. I have to think about the user. How is a person inside the building feeling? And this is more on the architect's shoulders than, so it's kind of swinging back to, you're the designer.
Mhm.
You have to think about these things because we don't want to have to come back to you 10
Yeah,
times. It should
yeah,
be, we got to think about these things because it's too expensive to go re-engineer it 5 times because we didn't design it right in the beginning
they
and
were
think
just
through these.
yeah, they were having fun creating a really beautiful image that isn't actually functioning, so, yeah, I
Yeah.
love Lisa's comment here for slow fashion draping everything, it's such a good point, like, it really makes you think about how it's gonna fall on the body, is it really gonna work that way before you get into a tech pack or passing it on to someone else who has to then take over and try to make it work, so that's great to
Yeah.
see. So who and what and who makes design conscious?
So this, I think I touched on a little bit. It's really the role. Well, is one of the things that I've come to realize in what we think of as a designer is, yeah, like we were just talking about. They go, oh, it's the fashion designer. It's the person that makes a pretty sketch. Like they're the designer, right? And then they kind of just separate it. There's everybody else, and then there's the design. But when you really look at what is design, Design is making decisions and taking an input and creating an output that solves a problem. Like that's what you're doing. You're basically you're problem solving
Mm.
through thinking through a problem, and you have all these inputs. And when you look at it that way, designer really is a much broader. I think it should be a much broader term. And so when I think of designers, in that bucket I put project managers, I put
Mm.
CFOs, because if you are the one deciding the budget, well, that constraint now is going to decide my design. If you're now putting a timeline on it, you're the project manager. Now you're gonna define. You are helping shape the design, and we've kind of dumped all that responsibility on like a couple people at the front end. Like magically, you're gonna design everything, and all the
Mm.
blame is it's all your responsibility, even though we have all these things happening. And
Mhm.
it's one of those, as the designers, we have the heavy weight on our shoulders because we get all the blame and all the praise if it goes well, right? All the blame if it doesn't go well.
Hells. Yep.
If it
You're
sells,
great.
it's you. If it doesn't sell,
Yep.
it's definitely you.
Yeah.
Um, all those things. And really, it's in order to design, all these other people are also designing with you. They're just like these silent
Mhm.
partners making decisions that impact your design.
Their
And
hands that are touching the process. Yeah.
yes,
Yep.
and so really thinking about that is, as designers, we also, because we have the weight, it as we make decisions, we also have the ability to shift things more, because when you do launch a successful product and it is more sustainable and all these things, you can really then begin to lean on it. And that's where, going back to the podcast, is it's so important to look at other companies that are being successful, other designers that did something, and be able to pull that weight in, because it is a two-way street in terms of
Mhm.
design. You are the one that's going to make the pretty image, and if you make it in the right way, the right things, you can guide that more so than before, I think,
Mhm.
because of that weight. So this is, and we're talking about fashion design, but I present conscious design to project managers and to C-suite as well, because
Mhm.
they have to be on board. They're
Mhm.
all of those people that I just listed have to be on board. And whether it's the designer convincing them, or a board member convincing them, or a customer, customers are really great at driving
Mhm.
direction, especially if they stop buying or they start buying a different product, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of weight that a customer can drive in. And so that's where it's always really important, if you can get some customers on your side, get them into it and go, hey, I talked to customer X
Yep.
and they said would buy this if with these changes, will not
Yeah.
buy. Like they returned it actually because they
Yeah.
didn't like it.
Consumer demand, and where they spend their dollars is where they're showing their support. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know we talked about this a little bit, but we can dive a bit more. So I don't know exactly. I didn't take fashion design fully. I had some of the classes, but in product design, we were always really just focused on have empathy towards the user, get in the end user's shoes, and that's kind of where it ended. Like that was which is really great. You should do that,
Mhm.
but that is the only person we were told to connect with, is just who's going to wear the prosthetic, who's going to wear the shoe, who's going to touch the product as the end user, and that was it. And that's been around for years, right? Human centric design is probably one of the more well known ones, that gets, if you're in industrial design, that gets hammered into your head constantly, as the thing, the thing to do. Um, but looking outside of that, and really, observation, becoming really aware of the product life cycle. If you were to skip everything else, like that would be the most important thing to do. And so I've had I've had the benefit of being able to work I've worked on factory floors, I've designed factory floors, I've worked at every stage, quality control,
Mhm.
all those things. There is no degree. I actually have talked to people about how it can maybe make a degree, make a degree for this, because
Yeah.
there's no way. Even when you go to school as a designer, like, all right, yeah, there's manufacturing. You learn how about sewing, and then you learn these different stitches. You don't use them, which means you're not going to remember them as well. And
Mhm.
there's no real focus on the fabrication side in enough detail to go, oh, I've seen 500,000 shirts get made.
Yeah.
I know how that machine works. I know what it does. I know what it can't do. I've sat there with the person that operates it, and I know that the designer does this, the pattern maker does this, and then the person sitting in the machine goes, yeah, I ignore that, and I actually move it over this much, and I shove it through at this angle, and then it gets what they think they wanted,
Yeah.
but it is not what they drew. And
Yeah.
I've I had some times in my early career that I designed stuff that I was able to. They had manufacturing in house, and so I got dragged out there by some of the lead people on the floor going, let me show you. Let me
Yeah.
show
Why?
you. Here's the design. It looks real good on the computer. Like, it's beautiful. It looks great. Here's what it actually looks like in person. Here is me like, let's
Trying to
see
sell it.
you try to assemble what you just said to do. Like, yeah, technically it's feasible, but I want you to do it right now and see how enjoyable it is. Does it
Yeah.
work the way you
How
want?
long it takes you or
How long does it take you to put it together? And
yeah.
um, I'll never forget. I made this. We were making little lasers. And they're like, oh, well, because I'm working on a computer, right? It's a nice size. I'm like, oh yeah, little screws. Like, yeah, they make this size screw. No worries. We'll just put it together. And
Mhm.
I had to go out, and I was like, okay, here's the thing. And it took me an hour and a half to put 4 screws in.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And that was a turning point. I will never forget that.
You're like, "Oh,
Because
man."
I went, oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay, it looks cool, it works technically, but we have to make
How much is your
millions of these.
labor cost going up
Yeah,
for an
and
hour and a half to put some screws in?
yeah, we're talking about an engineer grade assembler. They're not cheap, and hour and a half per unit, and we're supposed to be going to mass production with this, which means we're going to make 1 million a year. Like, we're
Yeah.
this is not going to work. We're
Yeah.
not going to do that. And so if you can spend time in each of those areas.
Mhm.
Go city quality control. See all the stuff that they catch. Talk to the actual operators. Go and see, it's great that you have a sewing machine at home that you can whip up a prototype. That machine is nothing like what a factory floor uses.
Mhm.
They that it's nothing. Other than there's thread and needle, the
Mhm.
rest of those machines are not related when especially bigger machines you go. So it's really understanding all of that, because if you don't observe all that, there's no way for you to know it, and if you don't know it, it can't inform your designs at all.
I'm gonna take a quick pause. It's 1 o'clock, and I think I put this was 12 to 1 on LinkedIn, but we were going to go till 1:30. So if you can stay, please do so. We're on the first pillar, and we will keep working to get all the other ones squeezed in by 1:30. So I hope you can all stay. And Ian, I have a question for you on this observation
Mhm.
pillar. Is if you are, maybe like Luza is working at home, an independent designer, and doing this on her own, and maybe she's custom making garments direct for a customer or small batch sewing for a small boutique or something. How would you advise the observation process in that kind of scenario, in a very small world of someone just kind of working
Yeah.
in that
Well,
manner?
so what you'll be surprised about is if you, and I do this all the time. I've done it enough that, like, I don't need to go in and see what making an electrical board looks like. I've seen all that. But you can reach out. If you reach out to companies, manufacturers, and go, hey, I'm a designer. I'm working on designs. I want to come see your facility, talk to you about your capabilities, learn. You'll most likely get a free tour. They are happy to talk to you. And it's one of those, like, as designers in school, no one ever told me like, hey, you can go talk to these people and they're really friendly and want to talk to you. Because ultimately, these manufacturers, the more designers they know, the more business they make.
Mhm.
They want to tell you all about what can their Sewing Master 5000 do and how
Yeah.
many they can produce. And if you start to talk to them about, hey, what are things that designers do that you have to fix? Like if I'm gonna, let's say I have a product that's gonna come to you, what should I avoid? What should I not do?
Mhm.
They will be happy to tell you, oh, don't do this. We ignore that. It doesn't work. Or this stitch does not actually do what you think it does. It's different. So really it takes time, obviously. But
Mhm.
if you just talk to people, they will show you. And if you're willing to, if you want to do this international, if you work for yourself, do this internationally, write off your whole vacation, go see 3 manufacturers, visit their
Mhm.
floor and go, hey, I'm a designer. I want to
Yep.
see what your capabilities are. I'm working on projects. Like, let's show me what you got.
Yeah.
They'll have a floor manager or somebody or a salesperson. Sometimes the salespeople are allowed to do it. They'll take you on the floor and they'll go, hey, we're making t-shirts today. Here's the t-shirt. Oh, here's our whatever stitching machine. And they will tell you and I've done these and I've had managers go, hey, you're working on this. Show Ian what you're working on. Like, what are you show him what the process you're doing right now? Here's the
Yeah.
quality control. Here's how, because they want to network, and
Yeah.
it doesn't,
Yeah.
the 30 minutes to an hour it takes to show you what they're doing is absolutely worth it to them, because you're going to remember them. You're going to remember their capabilities, and should you ever need them,
Yep.
you're
Even
way
5
more likely.
years 5 years down the road, you get a call
Years,
for a job. 10 years,
years.
you could be like,
Eh,
"Hey, remember that guy that gave me the tour in, you know, wherever."
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so it's really just being willing to ask. People are willing to tell you. And
Yeah.
if you talk to people that manufacture stuff, they will tell you, if you are polite and you are asking to learn so that you make their life better should your product ever come through, they will
Mhm.
tell you every problem they've ever had with Nike, Adidas, all these
Yeah.
companies that mass produce
That they've
products.
learned probably the hard way.
They've learned, and I've learned from fabrication people, like, at some point, if the designers don't listen, they still have to do the job and they just fix it themselves.
Yeah.
But you will be their best friend in the world if you go learn what it is that they need to fix, that they've been fixing for years, and go,
So
okay,
you don't.
if I give you something, I will make sure that that is correct.
Yeah.
And they will prioritize you as
Yep.
much as they can, because they
Appreciate
know they
it.
don't have to go fix everything that you did,
Yeah.
and you're making it easier with them.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. So
I
that would
would
be my
say that would be the same advice for any other role in the industry. Like if you're a designer, but you want to understand merchandising or sales, do informational interviews or go work in a retail shop, or you can, like you're saying, you can just ask and learn and gaining an understanding of all of the aspects of the industry, as many as you can, just for your understanding, because that's going to make you a better designer if you know what the process is, and hopefully growing your business. Then you've got that knowledge and those connections to help you along the way, and observing how all of those facets work together. So yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. Asking questions, we were just talking about that.
No,
Yeah.
I feel like we keep covering things and then we pull to the next slide. We're
The
like, oh,
slides
we
are
already
behind.
talked about all this.
Yeah, well, here, let's go to again, like awareness, observing, you've
Right.
touched on all of these things, and I like the empath call out too, because I think just paying attention to how what you're doing and every step that you're taking is affecting somebody in some way. So really, again, you're not ignoring the sewer, who's the one who has to deal with this like crazy, really difficult stitching angle or whatever it may be, but something as small as that too, you know, the the waste and the toxins that are going into some, local community and a landfill, affecting the entire community there. So thinking about, that having empathy for everything that you're doing too is such a good point.
Yes, it's a good thing to have.
Yeah. Um, Eliminating blind spots. Kind of touched on that. So impact. Let's go on to impact.
Yeah. All right. So this is just fun, fun little graphic of kind of showing in an easy way how sustainability has really, really changed. And so, I'll actually start at the bottom where it's like, oh, food, right? And food's easy because we all eat. Hopefully, that's a good thing to do. So, it started with, oh, let's do pesticide free, and then that got a lot of movement. People started spending money on that food. That became a market segment, and then it changed into organic food. Okay, well, what is organic? Well, it means that it's not next to pesticide filled, because you actually have to have a buffer zone between you. You can't have overspray. You can't be farming next to the one using the pesticides. You have to be far enough away that the wind can't blow it to your farm. Otherwise, you get rejected as being certified organic. And then permaculture came out, and then biodynamic, and then integrative, and I'm sure there'll be something else. But
Mhm.
basically, and look at the images, it's kind of the iceberg to spirulina. Like, you get a little bit of the good stuff in iceberg. Spirulina is only for really hardcore people that want that much green in anything they're about to eat. Now, that's not actually a uncommon product. Spirulina most is a fairly commonly used product that would never have sold really 50 years ago. It's
Mhm.
not. It's you could
You
not
can
have put
eat
that on the
grass.
shelf. It's a got to ask my wife what this for. She knows all about it. It's basically, I believe, an underwater grass that it's kind of like a seaweed
Mm.
that has the highest, like, all the reasons you eat kale for.
Is
Spirulina is like the behemoth that makes kale look like it would be
Yeah.
not great food.
And you just need one little shot of it and you're good.
Oh yeah, it's not, so you don't need a lot of it. It's very concentrated.
Yeah.
Uh, but this is something that, this is the evolution of sustainability. And like, we are over here on the right. We're not sitting on the left anymore. Um, and that's the other one is how do we treat products? And that's where this recycle, organic, upcycle,
Mm.
all that. We're now at that state. Circularity is really, really where we're at. People, and I've spent some time in Europe earlier this year. Circularity is elsewhere. It
Mhm.
is coming here. And so it's something, when you're observing, make sure you're looking at other countries and what they're doing, because it's going to impact us at some point.
Mhm.
All right, quality and luxury. So these are, we think of quality as a fixed thing. We think of luxury as a fixed thing. However, neither of those things are fixed. Everybody's version of what quality is and what luxury is at least a little bit different. And so when you're thinking about, oh, I'm going to create a quality product, you need to really understand, what does quality mean to your customer? What does it mean for the product you have? Quality may mean that it falls apart almost instantly. It could be, it's disposable napkins that they only need to last 24 hours, and that's it. Like, they need to be gone. That kind of quality in a car is not quality. That's not, you're not going to consider that quality if your car falls apart after 24 hours. So really understanding, how are people viewing quality, and that will allow you to create what you want. Same with luxury. It's certain areas, different things mean luxury. And there's some commonalities, right? But the big part is, luxury also doesn't mean it lasts forever.
Mhm.
And I love the fact that slow fashion is getting more traction. Like, we need more of that. But there's also, if you look at like fast fashion, there are times when you're only going to use something once, like wedding dresses. Probably only
Mhm.
use that once, like you personally. Or if you get into like the industrial side, there's gear that you wear, protective equipment. Technically, it falls under fashion. It's sometimes it's designed that way. It should only be used once. It can get
Mhm.
contaminated, it can get dirty, it can become unusable. So looking at, does that actually mean what you think it means, and what's the application to it? Um, yeah,
I love that you pointed this out, when we were talking previously of, uh, normally, I would think of quality in a garment as it lasting forever, like your hand knit wool, merino wool, cashmere, whatever sweater that you pass down generations, it just lasts forever and timeless classic. And then you had mentioned, a t-shirt that disintegrates after, so many wears or so many months. You can plant it in the ground and it disintegrates. And that's a whole other concept of luxury
and
and
I would
quality.
throw baby clothes. We have a 9-month old. You know
Yeah.
how long he wears.
Yeah.
If you have a kid, then you understand that when the label says 6 months, what they mean is that the baby will wear it while it's 6 months, and then 2 weeks later will not, because it doesn't fit anymore. There's no like
Yeah.
there's these times where you're like kids are the best example is they're constantly changing size permanent, like they will never shrink back down. They're
Yeah.
always growing to a new size. And
Yeah.
so that means you're buying tons of clothes. And
Constant. Yeah.
there's some that do really well and they've gone the quality last route. And so there's, our daughter, she had dresses that turned into shirts and they like looked
Mhm.
nice. Like it
Yeah.
was great. It was like, oh, we can use this forever. This is great. It was like a year of lifespan instead of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then there's other stuff like onesies, like they just don't. Like once
Yeah.
the torque is too long, it doesn't snap to it. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's no way to do
You're
it.
done. You're done.
You're
Yeah.
done. So how do you? What's the impact of that? Well, financially, the impact is if you buy new baby clothes, it's really expensive for something
Mhm.
that's only going to last a couple weeks.
Yep.
It's also a bunch of weight. Like what happens to that? Now we have how many clothes? Like we gave it to one of our friends who's having another baby. Like great, like there's passing on, but sometimes, you know, they poop their pants and nobody wants
Yeah.
that anymore. It's
Yep.
done. Like
Things
so
are there.
things
Like,
are there, there's stains. So
yeah.
thinking about that, like how do you address that? How can you make a positive impact with something that it must be a short-term use? Like
Mhm.
your user will never use that for a long time. Even if you built it to last a million years, no one will use it for that long.
All right.
How do you build into it a positive impact still? Because you know that that its lifespan is so short.
Yeah.
And I don't know the perfect answer for that. Maybe the baby clothes turn into dirt, like biodegrade super
Yeah.
easily or something. I have no idea.
Turns it you plant it and it grows flowers.
There you go. There
Yeah.
you go. Or food because that kid's gonna eat a lot of food.
Oh, there you go. Even better.
Full garden by the time they're one. Just put all
Yeah.
the clothes in the garden. But those are really important. Materials. So we get really attracted to materials, right? We think about impact. We go, oh, well, the material. Oh, the materials. What's the impact? Yes, it is. And it's really great to find sustainable materials. But if you have a 100% sustainable material that, let's say, it is biodegradable, but the rest of it, how it's made, the processing to get it there is not very eco-friendly. If it's, let's say, industrial biodegradable, and this is something that comes up a lot, biodegradable doesn't mean the same thing every time. There's a rainbow of biodegrading from you can throw it in the dirt and it will disappear on its own to it requires an industrial biodegradation facility that
Mm.
has the right enzymes and temperature and humidity and it'll process it. And so we focus on those materials though, but there's a lot more. There's supply chain, there's the social impact,
Mhm.
there's the methods of manufacturing it. There's how much, like if all of our trash right now turned into biodegradable material, we don't have the facilities to take care of that. What would we do with that?
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking about these things. When people talk about cost, and this is kind of an important one, is every industry gets subsidized in some way. Like right now, EV vehicles heavily subsidized so that they can be competitive. The funny part is petroleum is often subsidized in other ways. So now it's two subsidized products fighting fighting each other. So understanding that, especially if you're taking your product to someone who's got to make a decision about it,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out the real cost can be really tricky sometimes because you have to go through tax codes and you have to go through all these other things. But as a business, it's worth it to, if you have access to the financial team, to go to them and go, hey, what's the tax side of this? What is this? If you don't have that information, you might be missing a key piece that would say, hey, well, if we switch to this material, we'd save this. Really good example of that actually is tariffs. So I have a guy that I know that works in 3PL logistics, and they built an entire software just to help figure out code classifications of imported products to make sure that you're not overpaying on taxes. Because if you mislabel your product, you could be paying a high one. So he's actually helped people go from like 30% tariff to like 5, because they were just going, oh, I just get a regular description. Like, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's not, if you don't use the right words in the right spot, they're going to pick whichever one's the highest number because they'll take the money if you're going to
Yeah.
give it.
Yeah.
Uh, so those kinds of things, thinking about that is going to really impact your design. I already talked about life cycle. Yeah, the last sentence is really, really important part. So,
Yeah. Did I jump ahead too quickly
no,
there? Like,
it's
sorry.
really, the product doesn't just disappear, which we already talked about. It's the end of life.
Mhm.
Designing for end of life.
Mhm.
Again, it's one of those, just like legacy, you're creating it whether you decide to think about it or not. And so really, if you're going to look at impact, think about the end of life. And yeah, durability isn't always key. We covered that. Yeah,
So we have 10 minutes left.
we'll do these
Moving
last ones really quick.
Yeah, they're still important, just as
So
important.
important. So really connection, it's making sure that you're connecting the brands that are better connected with their users, with all of their um, spacing on the word, everybody who's invested in it, which goes beyond just the customer, will really, it needs to be a part of the DNA. You need to have that because you're going to need the support, especially in a bigger company. You're going to need the support of the sales team and the marketing and everyone else in order to connect with those people and get that feedback and
Mhm.
um, jump, I guess.
One thing you pointed out, maybe it was in the book or somewhere along the way, I was reading about this, and it's not just the connection to the consumer, but I guess we talked about this before, the people that touch the product, but you start to build like almost your community, and then you have a loyal following, and that's where I
Yeah,
think you can start
this
growing.
page.
Yeah, yeah, you grow your business by creating that community because and I know what I was gonna say. The internal connection, the company culture connection also is so
Yes.
important because you get your employees and your team, your staff to feel that they're really part of the whole thing. They're not just a salesperson, they're not just the design. Like you're all working together internally versus externally. Here's your slide on that. And that's exactly what I was thinking of. It struck me, or just really stood out to me to really consider the internal connection as well as the
Well,
external.
this kind of goes back to who's a designer. And really quick, a really good example is she was on my podcast. I forget which one, but she's on that list I shared. What she did is that she is designing these purses, and instead of like the usual process, which is go design something and then show everybody a final product, here you go, she involved through Instagram, she built a really good following by including people going, hey, I'm designing this purse or this bag. Here's 2 different buckles, which one do you guys like? Here's the zipper options.
Oh,
Which
she
ones
does
do you
that
like?
on Instagram?
Using Instagram and social media. So
Yeah.
and now she's turned this into her customers. And yeah, she's going to make smart decisions. She's not going to pick two options that one might be bad. It's between two good options. But
Yeah.
involving that and building that connection really allowed it to jump. And so people were now they're vested. Now they go, oh,
Yeah. They're
I'm
like,
helping
"Oh,
design.
I chose
I'm
that
just
buckle." She put it on her purse. I'm gonna
yeah,
use
I voted for that one, and it's happening. Like I
Yeah.
got to just pick it
She
in some way.
listened. She heard me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, we can jump to the next one.
Okay.
CSRs, really briefly, those it's a scary three-letter acronym that actually doesn't have to be very complicated. They are for large corporations, but it's really just stating what is your social responsibility. What are you doing socially that you're taking care of people in some way. And it can be small. It can start as one thing, and then it can grow as you have capacity
Mhm.
to do so. But it's a really good way, again, to build connection because when you share we're doing this, this is
Mhm.
the impact we're doing, people latch onto that and then go, I like that, I want to support that.
Mhm.
And build that connection more.
And another thing that we talk about quite a bit is the social impact. Like you could pick a social cause, maybe you are a small brand and you can't necessarily buy only organic cotton, for example, but
Right.
maybe part of your business and part of your impact that are making is supporting a certain organization or a nonprofit or a group of artisans or something. Like you can still build in and make plans to incorporate those kind of things, even if you're not fully sustainable or fully, eco-friendly materials. There's all these other ways that you can still make those small kind of plans and part of your DNA to, again, for that greater impact, in a smaller way, if that's what you're challenged to do, like the big financial things, you can pick that social cause as part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Accountability, really quick. This is something to think about is who's responsible. And again, like this is designers get kind of pegged with sustainability as our fault, whether we really decided or not. Um, and social impact in some way too. Uh, but really looking at this, accountability wise, figuring out who those people are outside of yourself that can help guide those things. Who's going to be involved, um, and how do you get them supporting those design changes? I think that's
Yeah. And legacy.
yes,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. And we've touched on this. It's all of the things that you are doing that's going to affect the legacy, right?
Yes.
It's yeah. Do we have are we let's see. Yeah. So next steps, I'm curious, does anyone have any questions, comments? I'm curious if people have thoughts on what they can do within their brand and then their work to implement some of these steps. I'd love to hear if there's any comments. And also, we have for you, let's see, um, the your book, Conscious Design. I'll mention it again, how much I loved it. And you have a sneak
Thank you.
peek for the first chapter, I believe, at this website, consciousdesignhouse.com. Is that correct? They can find it if they go there. They can find the book and the first chapter. They can
Find
read through.
there's a couple links. That one will give a lot of information about it. That actually has the podcast on it. And then if you go, actually, I have ianpeterman.com. That one has a link just for the book. If you click the link, put your email
Okay.
in, it'll share the book as well.
IanPeterman.com. Okay. Do we have any questions? Well, thank you everybody for coming. I hope you found this valuable, and we'd love to hear your feedback and how you're incorporating some of these into your work. And we're all here to support each other and strive for a better positive impact within design and everywhere in the earth, people, planet, all of those things is so important. So all taking little baby steps is progress. So thank you, Ian, so much for your time today and for sharing your knowledge and your experiences. And I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone for
Yeah.
coming today. Thank
Well,
you.
thank
And
you.
yeah, reach out to either one of us. You can find us on LinkedIn or just Google search and we're there. We'll
They were pretty easy to find.
easy to find. So thank you. Be well, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Britt.
Thank you.